Namaskar and good morning and welcome to everybody. Today we continue our discussion of the topic we took up a couple of weeks ago, love and surrender. In the first part, our subject was love of God. What it means to love God and what it takes to love God. Today, in this second part of the talk, our subject is self-surrender, both the philosophy underlying it and the practice of it. But before we took up this topic of love and surrender, if you remember, we had a series of talks on the subject of strength, stability, spirituality. In the first part of that talk, that series, which was on strength, we heard how both Vedanta and Vivekananda have both insisted that spiritual life is meant only for the strong. By strength, they mean not merely physical strength, but more mental and spiritual strength. By exercising our Ichha Shakti, willpower, and by practicing austerity or tapasya, by these two, we gain tremendous inner strength, no doubt. But apart from these three forms of strength, physical, mental, and spiritual, there is another kind of strength which we can call divine strength, the strength that comes from God. The true devotee feels that he or she is always under the protecting care of the Almighty God and feels infinite strength. As the great Saint Surdas sang, Nirbal ke Balaram, by the grace of God, I've understood that He is the strength of the weak. So self-surrender to the divine is a source of great strength. Not only that, it is in itself a mighty form of sadhana. It is not as easy as people think. What we people can generally do is pray to God and practice depending on Him at different times of the day, and offer our body, mind, and soul at the feet of our chosen deity repeatedly, again and again. Towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, after giving the entire teaching across 18 chapters, towards the end he says this: the Lord dwells in the hearts of all beings, O Arjuna, and by His Maya causes them to revolve as though mounted on a machine. Take refuge in Him alone. Take refuge in Him alone with all your soul. By His grace, you will gain supreme peace and the everlasting abode. When we draw ourselves away from Him, we become more egocentric and slip from the higher path. Instead of standing on the ego, let us try to surrender to God and make Him the center of our thoughts. And then, even our ethical and spiritual life become easy. If we practice prayer, intense prayer, when we are faced with obstacles, we will find some greater some greater power helping and supporting us. Life in the world is full of uncertainties. But there is something called the blessing of uncertainty. From a spiritual point of view, it is good to live in the midst of uncertainty. It is often good that everything we relied upon is taken away from us, and we are left without any worldly support. It is good if all old values, friendships, and attachments are broken, and we find that all we had clung to disappearing into the blue. It is good that all forms of external consolation, all hopes in other people crumble, because then we will be forced to think of God, who alone is our only true and eternal friend and guide. The experience is very painful, no doubt, but for people like us, it is very necessary. Otherwise, we forget God and also our spiritual destiny. We don't know anything about our future. We can't rely on unreliable things. But this is what we do. Sometimes the treatment is more painful than the disease itself. But we have to undergo it. We have to submit ourselves to it. The worse the disease, the stronger the treatment must be. In the case of every disease, there is what is called a curative crisis, which is equally painful. And however painful this process of curative crisis is, it is a step leading to full cure. So that cannot be avoided. Kunti Devi, the mother of the Pandavas, even prayed to Krishna to send them misery and trials at every turn. They were already in exile, facing hardship in the forest. Even then, she prayed to Krishna to send them misery and trials at every turn, to make them pass through hardships and suffering so that they could always remember God. And you know how pious, how God-fearing, how dharmic the Pandavas were. Maya is so powerful that we forget our past sufferings and continue in our old ways. So we need something to constantly remind us of God. All suffering is for our training. Our worldliness has to be curbed. It has to be roasted in the fire of tapasya, of austerity. When an iron rod becomes crooked, it needs some hammering to straighten it. In our egotism, we often forget that we are delicately positioned in between the hammer and the anvil. And so, when the hammer falls suddenly, we wince and cry out, "Oh, what has happened to me?" But we forget that we got in there ourselves. However, struggling need not always be on the worldly plane. in the case of spiritual seekers also, dry periods are common when they don't feel that initial fervor, when they find themselves in that, what the Christian mystics call the dark night of the soul. This experience can be as unsettling and as painful as worldly suffering. But of course, this only applies to very advanced seekers. Anyhow, egotism is the main cause of suffering. Very often we forget or ignore divine grace. We become overconfident in our own strength and become careless. At times, this even leads to arrogance. You know the old story of how a poor little mouse was made a tiger by a kind hermit out of compassion. And when it began to think too much of itself, he had to make it a mouse again because of its arrogance. Something like that happens in the lives of spiritual aspirants also. Divine grace is showered on us, which purifies us to a certain extent, and we are able to enjoy a certain amount of inner strength and freedom. But then we become egotistic. We begin to think too much of our progress. And then we become careless and even go to the extent of looking down upon others and trying to reform the world. Then the grace is suddenly withdrawn and we find ourselves alone, facing a terrible void. All these things can happen to us. So we should bear in mind that those who really and truly follow the spiritual path are less egotistic and more selfless. They are kind and considerate towards others. The less the ego, the greater the joy and freedom, and the better our work. So let us never think lightly of the spiritual blessings that we already have. There is no need to constantly brood over our weaknesses and past mistakes, but we should cultivate alertness of mind. Constant awareness is essential even in the path of devotion. Constant alertness is essential in order to profit by the blessings that God is already showering upon us. Then we will see the truth of what Sri Ramakrishna has said. If we are really humble and sincere, we will see the truth of what Sri Ramakrishna said. If we move one step towards God, He comes 10 steps towards us. Then, we can also learn to convert suffering into spiritual strength. True devotees don't pray for wealth or creature comforts, of course. They don't even pray for the removal of suffering. What they pray for is strength to bear their sufferings cheerfully for the love of God. There's a very fine song by Rabindranath Tagore, Tumhare potaka jare dao. Lord, give me the strength to bear thy standard to whom thou hast been pleased to give it. Give me the devotion to bear the greatest pain that is unavoidable in thy service. Thou mayest fill my heart with great pain. I do not want to get rid of this gift of suffering that thou art giving me with thine own hands. This misery will be my crest jewel, if with it thou givest me also devotion to thee. Make me work as much as thou likest. If thou dost not allow me to forget thee, nor my heart to lose itself in the entanglements of the world, if thou wishest, do thou bind me as much as thou likest, but keep my heart open to thee. Do not allow me to forget thee on any account. The song is so full of the sentiment of humility and surrender. And then there is that bold and beautiful prayer of Kunti Devi that we heard just now. O teacher of the world, let calamities befall us at every step, for they enable us to have your vision, which puts an end to the cycle of births. Since we are going to have unpleasant experiences anyway, it is better to make use of them for higher spiritual life. Nobody in this world can avoid pain, suffering, humiliation in some form or other in one's life. So, let these goad us to a higher purpose. Let us use them as stepping stones to the higher life. We need not go out of our way to court trouble. We should court neither suffering nor enjoyment, but seek God alone, who is beyond both. For that matter, divine grace may not necessarily remove all our miseries and sorrows. But if we have God's grace, we can pass through the ordeal of life more or less successfully. And in the process, we'll be able to burn much of the dross of impurity, and this increases our inner purity and spirit of surrender. Blessed are our sufferings if they bring us clearer knowledge and steadfast devotion. The more we see life, the more we understand that divine grace doesn't necessarily mean removal of all our troubles. But it always gives us devotees a wonderful inner poise, balance, and the strength to face all trials and hardships. It makes us purer and enables us to feel the divine presence, which finally brings an inner peace even in the midst of the greatest sufferings. Real peace is not like sleep. It's a calm state of mind that enables us to remain unmoved in the midst of troubles and hardships. And not only that, and be in touch with a vaster reality. Two things together. When we run away from the difficulties of life, we only weaken ourselves more and more. We see that those who constantly seek pleasure and avoid their duties, remain morally and spiritually stunted. They never attain to their full stature and are unable to utilize the grace that the divine is already showering on them. So let us make the best use of the grace that is already showered on us. Let us make the best use of the time and advantages that we have already received, instead of complaining about disadvantages or lack of time. And together with it, in a spirit of surrender, let us strive on for progress. We should be striving far more for love of God and grace of God than for the little things of the world that only make us forget Him and our spiritual destiny. So we should always be in a mood to turn towards God, no matter what our external circumstances. Now, we know something of karma and divine grace. Certain forms of karma have to be worked out through suffering. So when suffering comes, we should feel somewhat relieved if we have a really spiritual attitude. When suffering comes, we feel somewhat relieved because it is a sign that so much of the burden of karma can be reduced. Not only that, the helplessness brought about by suffering can be utilized spiritually by practicing self-surrender all the more. In pain and pleasure, in life and death, the Lord is our own. He is the soul of our souls, the life of our lives. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that suffering is the tax that we have to pay for living in the body. We have to pay these taxes, and sometimes in heavy installments. And maybe then for some time there may be a respite, if that is in our karma. During his last illness, Sri Ramakrishna was often heard saying, "Let the body feel the pain, but you, O mind, you remain in bliss." That means the goal of God realization is reached not only through spiritual disciplines, but also through a proper spiritual attitude. What we should by all means avoid is improper, unnecessary action. So we should take care of both the inner attitude and the outward action. We should move slowly and steadily, exhausting our karma. Be in tune with the divine within, and at the same time, be careful about what we do. We must constantly correct ourselves both on the thought plane and on the plane of action. We mostly suffer because of the discrepancy between our spiritual aspirations and the hard reality that we have to face in the world. This suffering is not by itself anything bad. It may even be for our own good if it acts as an incentive to find an inner spiritual readjustment. Sometimes when suffering is extreme, we even come to gradually feel that we are not really of this world, even though we are having to live in it. This is a matter of personal experience. In a certain sense, we all get what we deserve. We wish for a thing, we get it, but together with it, we also get the good and the bad that are inseparably connected with it. We seek certain forms of happiness, and then, as Swami Vivekananda says, happiness presents itself before us, wearing the crown of sorrow on its head. We can't have the one without the other. Our present state, as you know, is the result of our past and present desires. So let us try to be as desireless as possible, to adjust ourselves to the circumstances that we ourselves have brought about, and then try to do what we can to rise above them. Let us work out our destiny, learning to depend more and more on the Lord as we work out our karma. Then this world will become a training ground, and through it we will be able to reach our spiritual goal. Then, even if we continue to remain in the world physically, we will be no more of the world. We will be the Lord's wherever we are. Slowly, if we persist in these practices, we will begin to see everything as the play of God. It is all His play. That is the fact. He comes to us in different forms, as friend and enemy, as joy and sorrow. So let us play our part as best as we can, at the same time witnessing it with detachment. Whatever we see around us, whatever happens to us, is all His sport, His Leela. It is for the sake of His joy. We can only wonder at how God indulges in His pranks, playing with our hearts, producing pain and pleasure. Many times, we don't find any rhyme or reason in the whole cosmic process. But this whole cosmic process, in all its madness, in its cruelty, its pain and pleasure, it is all nothing but the manifestation of God's playful spirit, of the joy He has in His play. We too should understand it as a play and enjoy to do with it. That it is all for the sake of the great fun of the game. It takes a large measure of detachment. Many of the songs that Sri Ramakrishna used to sing on the Divine Mother Kali are symbolic representations of this great cosmic process. The crude mind of a worldly person understands them in a crude way and misses their whole inner meaning. Really, their symbolism is marvelous. It expresses truth in a very striking way. As far as the truth can ever be expressed in words. Sri Ramakrishna especially liked a song about the Divine Mother flying kites. We are all kites that she is flying in the sky, and we are all held by separate strings so that we can't get away. But there are some very clever kites that do manage to cut the string and fly away, never to return. And as the song goes, and then Mother is beside herself with joy and claps her hands, although it was she herself who had held the string. So, what we have to do is to try to somehow snap the string that ties us to this phenomenal world for Mother's own play. And then we are liberated. And Mother rejoices at our freedom. Otherwise, the play will go on indefinitely with all its joys and miseries, fulfillments and frustrations, never to end. All one never-ending round of mad frolicking seen from Mother's side, but one of terrible bondage and extreme suffering seen from ours. That is why the saints and mystics say, Forget your little imaginary individuality and learn to joyfully dance God's mad dance. But our difficulty is when waves of passion and emotion rise in our minds, we think they rise from ourselves, that they are our impulses, that they all belong to us. We don't even realize the real nature of our slavery. When we have to take part in the great cosmic dance, we should know it is only a play and nothing but play. While in the depths of our being, we remain only as witnesses and have no identification with it. Even our so-called individuality is only a manifestation of the cosmic. But we make ourselves miserable by cutting ourselves away from the cosmic principle or God, who starts and leads the dance. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when you boil potatoes in a cooking pot, they jump about and dance inside that pot. We are no different from those potatoes. If potatoes could think, they too would probably imagine that they were dancing out of their own free will, not knowing that they were made to dance. If we try to realize this truth fully, it will save us a great deal of fear and anxiety. The saints also say, be an instrument, be a mere instrument in the hands of the divine. We get a glimpse of freedom only when we are in perfect tune with the cosmic reality. What we ordinarily call freedom is animal freedom. Freedom of the instincts and not freedom from the instincts. From a Vedantic point of view, the working of our senses is the unconscious manifestation of the cosmic energy. The more we love that kind of freedom, the more we live in the unconscious and the more bound we become. Instead of living an instinctive life, we have to live an intelligent life, a conscious life. Freedom of the instincts, that is to say, license, that freedom is slavery. It is not freedom at all. The so-called freedom, the so-called free person is actually a slave of their own instincts and moods. And the whole world is full of such free people, all puppets dangling very precariously on the strings of God's delusive power. We spiritual aspirants should try to feel that we are instruments in the hands of God. The best attitude is that of an instrument, knowing oneself not to be not the doer, not the agent. We are all particles in a mighty stream of cosmic energy that is working throughout the entire creation, and nothing more than that. So we should always try to be cosmocentric and become as impersonal as possible in everything. Our bodies and minds are only instruments of this mighty power that we call God. To the extent we are able to become cosmocentric and more detached and impersonal, to that extent we succeed in transcending this little illusory individuality. To that extent, we'll be able to give up false ideas of agentship and attain true peace. The more we distance ourselves from God, the more miserable we become. Really speaking, do we keep our bodies alive, or is it the divine energy that is working through us? We are in dynamic contact, whether we know it or not. We are always in dynamic contact with that divine energy at different levels of our personality, physical, mental, or spiritual. The moment that energy is withdrawn, we become lifeless, dead. So let us never attribute anything to ourselves, but learn to attribute everything to God. Let us only try to become fit channels for the expression of God's will. This is a special spiritual capacity that we need to develop by practicing real humility and surrender. It needs constant, conscious effort. As we heard right at the beginning, egotism obstructs the free flow of God's energy through us. It cuts us away from the divine source, and that is why we suffer. As a matter of fact, we are only instruments in God's hands. You may remember Swamiji's experience in Kashmir. He was looking at an old, dilapidated temple that bore marks of Muslim vandalism. And he said to himself that he wouldn't have allowed that to happen had he been alive then. Suddenly, he heard the voice of the Divine Mother. Do you protect me, or do I protect you? Swamiji was a realized soul, and so he could hear Mother's voice. But we shouldn't mistake our own voice for God's voice. God's voice is not so easily heard. We can hear God's voice only when our minds are purified and our wills have become one with the divine will. And that voice never contradicts reason, though it transcends it. What is important for us is to strive consciously to connect our little self with God. When we are awake, we have to strive for this consciously. When we go to sleep, we should think of the divine energy that supports our being during sleep. We constantly say, I. But when this self-important I sleeps, who protects it? What keeps it alive? Our trouble is that we think this little individuality is an independent entity. But no, it is not. It is just a tiny part of an infinite existence. Many people find the idea of God as energy very appealing, more than the idea of an impersonal absolute. But it's not enough to superficially appreciate the idea. One should become established in it. That will become easy if we regard ourselves as the soul and God as the soul of our souls. One of Sri Ramakrishna's favorite songs was, O Mother, all is done after thine own sweet will. Thou art in truth self-willed, O Redeemer of mankind. Thou workest thine own work, men only call it theirs. Thou art the moving force, and I am the mere machine. The house am I, and thou the spirit dwelling there. I am the chariot, and thou the charioteer. I move along as thou, O Mother, movest me. So we all know this song, Shokoli Tomari Icha. However, it is important to know that the idea conveyed by this song refers to a very high spiritual state, which one attains after long, long struggle and great effort. Only those who have passed through such intense struggle can give themselves up truly, surrender wholly and unconditionally at the feet of the Lord. We won't be able to do it right away. Whatever the form of spiritual striving, it is all for purifying the heart and making it fit for this total self-surrender, which can only be accomplished after going through one's spiritual practices, spiritual discipline with great patience and perseverance. As they say, true self-surrender comes only after our wings are tired. Like the wings of the bird in Sri Ramakrishna's parable. As you know, the bird was sitting on the mast of a ship and didn't know that the ship was moving. When it suddenly realized that, it started flying east, west, north, and south in search of land, only to find limitless water everywhere, in all directions. Finally, when its wings were dead tired, when it could do no more, it came back and sat on the mast, allowing it to be carried by the ship. So, only the person who has put forth maximum self-effort will know what true self-surrender is. It's not simply enough to say, it's all God's will. I've left it all to God. Self-surrender is a very high state of mind. It's a profound spiritual attitude that is the result of the awareness that one's soul is a part of the cosmic soul, and that one's body and mind are merely instruments of a higher power called God. That kind of true self-surrender comes only after a direct spiritual experience. But at our level though, it becomes a spiritual discipline that we have to practice. How to practice self-surrender? There are a few practical things that all of us can do. First of all, let us not have a blueprint of life. By blueprint, I mean a cut and dry plan of our life. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a general plan. Of course, we must plan our future in a general way. But after all is said and done, we must also resign everything to the Lord, to the divine. Let Him do with us what He will. No doubt, when it comes to spiritual matters, we should aspire strongly for spiritual progress. We should desire spiritual experience. But let us leave the details to God. We should gradually learn to be in tune with God and follow His will for now. If we sincerely persist in this, we will come to a stage where we will be in tune with God. Now, before one can follow God's will, the question is how to understand God's will. Yes, nobody can fully understand God's will, not even the greatest saint. God and His actions are inscrutable. Still, as great monks like Yatishwaranandaji and Prabhavanandaji have said, they have insisted, if we try sincerely and humbly to understand, it is possible to at least live in harmony with God's will to a great extent. By living a strictly moral and ethical life through prayer and worship, by japa and meditation, and by dedicating all that we do to God, it is possible to live in harmony with God's will. Then, whatever we happen to have, material possessions, mental resources, even spiritual blessings, everything that we happen to have must be regarded as a sacred gift from God to be passed on to others. Let us not cling to them. You know the story of Job in the Old Testament, a most inspiring life story. He lost everything that he had. He was a very well-to-do person, but he lost, in quick succession, he lost everything, people, possession, property, everything that he had. But because he was a devotee, he neither complained nor lamented. He just said calmly, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will go. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Please, when you return home, make it a point to read the story of Job. It is beautiful. It is just a few lines, but it goes directly to the heart. How detachment, devotion, and surrender, how closely they are interrelated. So this is the kind of detached calmness that we devotees must aim to attain. Just now we were hearing about egocentricity and cosmocentricity. Some people, we may see, they appear to be very calm, balanced, strong, not because they are cosmocentric, but because they are downright apathetic. They're not bothered by other people's sufferings. But when something happens to themselves, at the first touch of pain, they collapse. It is better not to have that type of detached calmness. On the other hand, the cosmocentric calmness of a saint comes as a result of complete surrender to God after coming into close touch with Him. That is why I said it's a result of a direct spiritual experience, true self-surrender. True calmness, true balance under all circumstances is attained only when one is established in God. Another thing to remember, to practice, is if one practices complete self-surrender, one cannot take any wrong step. It's easy to say, I've left everything to God and keep doing just as one pleases. If I am too attached to the world, too attached to my own desires, I can't even think of self-surrender. Without some detachment, self-surrender is impossible. So we need to practice detachment also. And for complete self-surrender, the complete self-surrender of a saint, complete detachment is necessary. We can't hold both, hold to God and the world both at the same time. And as I said, divine grace may not remove all our worldly miseries and sorrows. But if we receive the grace, we will be able to pass the ordeals of life successfully. And in the process, we burn up the dross in us and attain much inner purity and also develop greater resignation to God's will. If misfortunes bring us clearer knowledge and steadier devotion, then, as Swami Vivekananda says, blessed are our sufferings. What else can we do but take things as they are and try to do our best? Whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, our past, present, and future rests in the hands of a power much greater than ourselves. All we can do is play our part as best as we can and surrender ourselves to that divine power as much as we can. As Krishna says in the Gita, Ma manusmara yudhyacha. Remember me and fight the battle of life. But it's a great fortune to serve in the Lord's cause. If we have that blessing, and if we make use of that opportunity, we need not worry about our future. Everyone has to pass through periods of much uncertainty. Whenever we feel anxious for any reason, let us repeat the Lord's name, think of Him, and practice self-surrender. This is the best we can do, and if you think of it, this is the only thing we can do. Practicing remembrance and surrender. And try as much as possible to be in His presence under His protection. If we can do this, we can be sure that it will bring us great strength and peace of mind. If we sincerely offer all the fruits of our actions to the Lord, who dwells within us and guides us from within, we can be at peace. Even when we feel that the whole world has forsaken us, the Lord will grant us the certitude. He will show us by sure signs that He is always with us and within us. So let us depend on Him and pray for His help, and He will surely illumine our way. In the midst of our troubles, in the midst of our loneliness, if we pray to Him and depend on Him, He will make us feel His presence. He will give us all the strength and courage we need. And since we live in this world, one last thing. If we want peace of mind, let us never expect anything from this world. Any reward. If we happen to get something good, let us be thankful. If not, let us thank God. And let us know in our heart of hearts that He alone is our own. As the soul of our souls, He cannot leave us, nor we